Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff operations officer, assisted the national security team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the vice commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
At Arlington National Cemetery, a wreath will be laid at the tomb of the unknown soldier. The annual Veterans Day ceremony honors those who put their country and their duty first. But CBS News has uncovered some cases where these service members say that they were injured in the line of duty and are now facing an uphill battle to get health benefits and pay. Senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge has been looking into this. Catherine, good morning.
Well, good morning, Anne-Marie. According to the most recent data obtained by CBS News, about 30% of injury claims that are recommended by local commanders are determined not to qualify by the Air National Guard, raising questions among some service members about whether correct policies and procedures are being followed.
It's infuriating because you're shouting into the wind and nobody's listening.
Those sentiments sting for Master Sergeant Jim Buckley, whose military family has served for 3 generations.
Has the Air National Guard been like a second family?
I've been with the same folks for the past 13 years and care a lot deeply for them.
After tours in Africa and Iraq, Buckley says he injured his shoulder during his physical fitness test in 2019.
I thought it was just a minor inconvenience. It's going to get better.
But a year later, the shoulder needed surgery, and another physical turned up a sleep disorder, migraines, and hypertension.
Did you have any of these health conditions prior to your military service?
No, never.
Unlike the active component of the military, the Guard requires paperwork to determine the injury happened or was aggravated while serving. Buckley struggled to get his medical issues recognized for benefits, what's called a line of duty determination.
If you don't have the line of duty, it's just like the injury didn't happen. You're on your own. You're taking care of the injury. You're footing the bill.
While his shoulder injury was eventually approved, other medical conditions were not. After Buckley was taken off military orders, he says his family lost his military health insurance and his monthly income of more than $4,000.
It's been a great hardship on us these last couple of years. We're running out credit cards, dipping into savings.
Jeremy Sorensen also served in the Air National Guard as an F-16 and A-10 pilot, and now advocates for injured service members through the nonprofit usjag.org.
Jim Buckley is representative of what we believe to be thousands of service members that are being mistreated.
Buckley's paperwork indicates his Air Guard command in Mississippi backed up his injury claims, but the final call was made by the Air National Guard.
Have you been provided any evidence by the Guard that supports these denials?
No evidence.
The war on America's National Guard and Reserve members. Well, welcome back to More War Monday. And I don't like doing this show, but the Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Why is the Air National Guard leadership conducting a war against dedicated and patriotic service members and their medical benefits? That's crazy. That clip from CBS is almost a year old, and multiple investigations are being conducted trying to resolve the issue, but not much success is happening. Friend of the show and journalist J.M. Phelps wrote for the Gateway Pundit recently that according to an investigation by Scripps News, and I'll quote, in the last couple of years, hundreds of injured and sick Air National Guard members have filed claims for medical care and pay that get approved by local commanders and then denied by national headquarters, close quote. Well, today we'll show you the truth about what is happening to these service members and their families. The impacts of this devastating policy are dramatically damaging to morale and to our national security. Luckily, we have an organization that focuses on setting things right. And trust me, our friends over at USJAG won't rest until they do. They've been on the show before. And my guest today is a guy named Jeremy Sorensen. You just saw him in the clip. He enlisted in the Air National Guard in 1999, serving initially as an enlisted firefighter. He then earned his commission and served as a fighter pilot flying the F-16 and A-10 on multiple combat deployments. Jeremy's currently the Director, Guard, and Reserve Affairs for Uniformed Services Justice and Advocacy Group, USJAG. Jeremy, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Good afternoon, Colonel Maness. I first of all like to thank you for having us on and helping bring this to light to the American public. Monumental problems in the Department of Defense that are truly destroying the lives of thousands of our patriotic service members out there. I'll just open up a little. I'll have to warn you a bit and warn the audience. Some of what I'm going to say today is going to be shocking, hard to believe, and quite frankly, may really upset a lot of your viewers. It should, what we're talking about, should really boil the blood of every red-blooded American. We're talking about systemic abandonment of our military members by our own military leadership following in the line of duty injuries, illnesses, and diseases. So that's kind of a overall what I've got for you.
Yeah, Jeremy, like I said in my opening, I don't really like doing shows where we have to identify issues like this, but we have to do them. And I think those of us that have served in uniform, especially us folks that have done multiple decades and retired, we really don't like taking these on, but we have to because it's our duty to these patriots that are being hurt by a system that has gone awry, and it's our job to call it out, right?
Absolutely, sir. And if I'm sure you've seen some of the other media that USJAG has done over the last year. I've been very fortunate to, and I'm very grateful to serve as the director here doing this work. We defend the rights of injured service members 100% pro bono, and we've been around for about 18 years doing this work. But in the last year, I've had the opportunity to meet with some fantastic journalists and all, and it's really been difficult. I've been on national media where I've gotten a little bit of emotional as a retired fighter pilot. That's a little different to be in that predicament. The Department of Defense, specifically here, what we're mostly going to talk about is the Air Force and the Air National Guard engaged in a coordinated, concerted, unlawful denial of medical care, pay, military status, and disability retirement benefits, again, falling in the line of duty injuries. Military members get hurt, get sick, and then the Air Force, unfortunately, abandons them. It's really, in my opinion, disgusting. It's hard for me to talk about, but it's important. Just like you said, we have to bring this to light. It's an absolute monumental national security issue. And to be perfectly clear,
yeah, I think it's important that can you describe the right process that's supposed to happen for a National Guardsman and a woman when they get hurt, like Sergeant Buckley, who was mentioned in that opening clip. What is the process supposed to look like?
So what the process is supposed to look like is the National Guard or Reserve or Air Force member, generally we're talking here about the Reserve Forces, including the Guard, they get injured, they report that to their medical unit, to their command, etc. The medical provider in the unit is supposed to start what's called a line of duty determination, and then the line of duty determination, it's an Air Force form, it requires a number of signatures. But as soon as the first couple signatures happen, which happens within a day or two, or at least it's supposed to, the member is retained on active duty if they were on active duty, and provided care, provided continuing benefits to get them back to where they're fit to fight and get back into doing their job. What's happened over the last few years is an incredible bureaucracy has been built around this in order to try to deny the line of duty determinations. It now requires approval all the way up to the National Guard Bureau in Washington, D.C. And what we've seen since the Air Force decided to withhold those authorities or move those authorities to such a high level, there's been a dramatic increase in denials of benefits. And so I'll talk here just a little legalism. One of the most important things, because most of our clients experience this, and most of our service members are on a lengthy tour of duty. When I say lengthy, greater than 30 days of military orders. When you're on greater than 30 days of military orders, you are treated the same as an active duty member. Legally, you are the same as an active duty member. And one of the important facets of that is any injury, illness, or disease that you either incur or aggravate is presumed under federal law to be in the line of duty. And it takes, the government has a burden to disprove that. And that burden is an incredibly high evidentiary standard, which is clear and unmistakable evidence. In our cases, and every single one of our clients, they have never proven that, never provided one bit of evidence. They have simply pencil whipped the documents, said it's not in the line of duty in order to deny benefits to the member.
Now that's interesting because I was on active duty nearly my entire career, with the exception of some delayed entry inactive reserve time at the very beginning. And I've served as a commander at several levels. So I'm very familiar with LODs, line of duty determinations. And I don't recall one ever on any of my commands ever leaving the base when the LOD was determined to be, in fact, in the line of duty.
Absolutely, sir. And to be perfectly clear, there is a difference between Guard, Reserve, and active duty, but for this matter, it really shouldn't be brought up to any higher level. To be perfectly clear, it's intentional violation of the law and the Constitution we're talking about. Malfeasance, not just incompetence, mistakes, errors, or oversight. The motivation behind this, or reasoning, is quite simple. It's cost savings. Senior leaders of the Air Force depriving injured military members of congressionally mandated medical care, pay, and benefits so that they can use that money elsewhere. I actually had the opportunity to have a conversation with one of the senior officials a couple of months ago, I'm going to say about 4 months ago, with Deputy Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Air Force, Mr. Troy McIntosh. And he expressed to me that it was his decision to bring these matters up to the National Guard Bureau level. He was emphatic that he made this happen. He was also emphatic that the general concept that the military has, which is absolutely supported by law, that if you get injured during military service on the base, it's not necessarily in the line of duty, which was very, very concerning for me to hear that directly from the horse's mouth from a senior official in the Air Force.
Yeah, I mean, generally for active duty forces, which is where my expertise lies, we would do an LOD if somebody had like a traffic accident, whether it was on or off base, and say they were not wearing their seatbelt, which is a violation of a direct military order, by the way. Then that could be determined not in the line of duty. That injury which can have downstream effects, but it doesn't necessarily take your medical care away from you, like what we're talking about here. I can't imagine being on the base on duty, because a guardsman or reservist is on duty when they're on the base, and something happened to get them injured, and it not being determined to be in the line of duty. It just makes no sense to me. We got to take this break, Jeremy. When we come back from the commercial break, I want to dive into that a little bit more and see and let you talk about the types of things that you're seeing, because every human being's different. So their injuries are always different, which means that the process has to be able to look at them from a different perspective and context each time a decision is made in this process. So I want to give Jeremy the opportunity to tell us what he has seen and heard and what's wrong with this process at this point. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show on Worldview Tube. And X Spaces simulcast with Jeremy Sorensen of US JAG.
Hello, I'm Brandon House of WorldviewTube.com. Do you remember when Fox News left us hanging high and dry 4 years ago on election night? Well, I sure do. Well, why would you want to go back and watch them on election night? And you don't have to. You can come right here, WorldviewTube.com. We're going to have with us live in studio Leo Holman, Colonel Rob Maness, Garland Favorito, on location at Mar-a-Lago, Roger Stone reporting. And we'll be getting updates and reports from the head pollster at Rasmussen, Mark Mitchell. Tell your family and friends and join us beginning at 6 p.m. Central, 7 Eastern on election night, November 5th. WorldviewTube.com. You can also watch us on your flat screen television. Just go to Roku, type in WorldviewTube, and before you can finish typing it, it'll pop up. Save us as a favorite on your home screen of Roku and watch us right there on your flat screen television. Or watch us through our iOS app, WorldviewTube. WorldviewTube.com. Tell your friends. WorldviewTube, committed to helping you understand the times.
Our investigation found it was a policy change, making that second layer of LOD claim review mandatory for all Air National Guard members. Military officials told us they expected to make the process more effective and efficient and to ensure accuracy. But the changes also resulted in an increase in denials. Since November last year, the Air National Guard says it overturned local commanders' approvals more than 20% of the time. That's 185 claims where service members were denied medical care and benefits.
What would you say to other people in the Air National Guard who are going through something similar to what you went through right now?
I would just say keep fighting, keep that determination, and do not give up.
Since February, ABC 15 and Scripps News have asked the Air Force about LOD benefits complaints. In July, the Air Force told us the Office of Inspector General is taking action to accelerate resolution of many of these disputed medical claims, and they're also putting a fresh set of eyes on other claims to determine if errors were present in the original medical decisions. Last week, the Air Force said that process is ongoing, and they hope to identify and correct any potential systemic issues.
Until I see that the numbers are changing and people are getting, these LODs and their benefits, and they're not being pushed out before they're getting taken care of medically or whatever it is that they're entitled to, I'm not convinced that the Air Force really has fixed the problem.
As other Air National Guard members wait on reviews and their appeals, Christine Jornis says the military did make good on her back pay and benefits. She hopes she'll still have a future in aviation in the civilian world.
We shared the results of our investigation with members of the U.S. House and Senate Armed Services Committees, and we've asked whether they'll look into this and ensure Air National Guard members are treated fairly. We will let you know what happens. I'm Senior Investigator Melissa Blasius, ABC 15, Arizona.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. We're live here on Worldview Tube and X Spaces simulcast, and it's War Monday. Unfortunately, it's another discussion about a war on American service members, this time with the Air National Guard, with the Director of Guard and Reserve Affairs for US JAG, an advocacy group that takes care of service members who have been wrongfully treated, discharged, denied benefits, et cetera, and it's been around for about 18 years. And Jeremy Sorensen is that individual we're talking to. He's a former fighter pilot, an enlisted firefighter, and has over 20 years of service in the Guard and Reserve. Jeremy, you mentioned Assistant Secretary of the Air Force, Troy McIntosh, I believe it was, in the last segment, and that he personally took pride in this change, and that's what I just wanted to show with that clip there, that this has been confirmed. It was a policy change to make LOD, line of duty determinations, go from the base level all the way up to the headquarters for the National Guard Bureau. Is that a fact?
Yeah, Colonel Matt. Absolutely. So in that happened in May of 2023. Now, what's kind of interesting is although it was codified in the Air Force instruction in May of 2023, the Air National Guard had kind of an unwritten policy, and they were doing that for the last year or two before that. Now, you just showed the that Scripps News piece, which I'd like to make a couple of comments on that tie directly into this, because the U.S. Air Force informed Scripps News of some things that Scripps News then published that weren't really true. The Inspector General's Office of the Air Force, under Lieutenant General Stephen Davis, has indeed received dozens of complaints. However, to date, they have made, in over 20 months of him being directly aware, absolutely zero resolution on any of the complaints. They have stood up teams like they spoke about. Now there's some disparity in what they tell the news and what service members have been told, but they've stood up a couple of different teams, and I was recently informed that the teams aren't actually investigating any of these complaints. They're simply parsing them out to different places. And there's a lot of question as to who these teams actually work for, whether they work for the Inspector General or whether they work for Mr. Troy McIntosh in Manpower and Reserve Affairs in the Air Force. And it's an important distinction, because the Inspector General is supposed to be an objective look from the outside. As you've spoken, I believe, with Mr. Ryan Swayze of Walk the Talk before, and we've learned in this process that the avenue of redress through the Inspector General has completely failed. So we really don't know at this point if anybody's actually looking at fixing any of these problems, or if it's all just the right hand covering up for the left hand, etc.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still common practice, but I discovered that it was pretty common practice for IG offices to send questions to the commander responsible for the complaint about the process, procedure, order, or whatever it is, was. That's kind of a conflict of interest, in my opinion. I always ask for independent investigators to go in and actually talk to individuals involved in the process instead of just running it to the commander responsible for it, because they're responsible for it and they need to be held accountable. And that's part of the challenge with the Inspector General's process. So this McIntosh guy, is he a former service member or what? What's his background?
Yeah, it's interesting. He served for an extensive period of time in the U.S. Air Force as an enlisted member, retired as a Chief Master Sergeant, was a high-ranking enlisted member. But then over the course of the last 15 years, he's held a number of different senior level positions, senior executive positions, which don't necessarily line up with his education, etc. He has a degree in culinary arts, which is, to me, very concerning. Nothing against that background, but it's not law nor medicine. And law and medicine are what all of these determinations are based upon. So why that is, why he's in that position, I do not know. But it's very concerning. Conversations I've had, others have had with him. It's very clear, also based on numerous documentation, records, if you will, that he has signed his name to, that he has no idea what legal determinations mean, no idea what these medical determinations mean, and also, more importantly, it doesn't seem that he has any understanding of what his actions are doing to our injured service members.
Yeah, that's a nice segue, Jeremy. My next question is, you mentioned that you have seen multiple consequences from these decisions from more than just one person, one service member and their families. Tell folks about those experiences and what people are experiencing. I know Sergeant Buckley's case was in that first clip. I interviewed, I think, the chief legal officer from USJAG about Sergeant Ortiz, U.S. Marine, from a previous case. What other of the consequences are people experiencing? Just to give McIntosh the indication, a little bit of the taste of it in case he or his staff watch this show.
Yes, sir. So first of all, a little bit personal here. Last Friday, just a few days ago, I sent out a couple of texts because a few things hit me on my desk at the same time. As of then and now still, I have one service member in jail. I have one service member in a psychiatric ward, and I have one service member with stage 4 cancer in the hospital. None of these 3 service members are being provided their correct benefits. All 3 were 100% unlawfully released from active duty. So that's just a little snapshot of 3 of my clients, dozens of clients I have, but those are probably the 3 most dire situations right now. So when a line of duty, so backing up a little to tie this in, you were speaking of on active duty, a line of duty was generally used to determine whether there was misconduct or something that would not be in the line of duty. Because a Guard member comes on and off a military status, there has to be that mechanism to determine that their injury was related to or occurred during the time that they were serving. So that's why we have that process. When the process doesn't work and when these members are found not in the line of duty, their pay is taken away. Their health care is taken away. Their health care for their families is taken away. In some cases, individuals maybe are on a long-term set of orders. They may be in government housing. They also lose their BAH or their government housing, so their housing allowance or their actual quarters. They lose that because they're no longer on a military status. One of the solutions, if you will, that the National Guard points to is, well, you can go get care from the VA. That's a whole nother can of worms that we won't get into, but the VA is not set up to take care of currently serving service members. The DoD has that responsibility. So it's a shift of the responsibility there. To talk a little bit about some individual cases, so Master Sergeant Buckley, an absolute true patriot, and he's put not only his decades of service into the country, decades of service and sacrifice over the last 2.5 years, he has been advocating for himself and raising the alarm about what is going on. In his case, he has not had any pay from the DoD nor medical care for the last approximately 2.5 years, following all of his line of duty injuries. And what's really happened even since the time of that interview with Catherine Herridge last year, Sergeant Buckley has gone through every appeal process in the Air Force, and he has been provided absolutely zero relief. So he has demanded the evidence that is required to be provided to him to show that his conditions are not in the line of duty. Nothing's ever been provided. And in fact, in our latest communication from Mr. Troy McIntosh stated that the Air Force Form 348, which is the line of duty determination, is in and of itself the evidence, which is, I'm going to say it here, it's an absolute lie. It's an absolute falsification. The government report is not evidence. So Master Sergeant Buckley has lost everything in the last couple of years, and the U.S. Air Force, the Department of Defense, does not have anything to base this on. It's purely fabricated, and now the Inspector General's involved as well in covering up numerous improper and unlawful actions by senior officers in the National Guard and the Air Force, including all the way up to the SES level, to the Deputy Assistant Secretary, and to the Assistant Secretary. And I don't want to leave out here the Assistant Secretary, or the Secretary of the Air Force, Mr. Frank Kendall, is 100% aware of everything going on here. and has not intervened and fixed anything.
Yeah, in my review of Buckley's case, they even said that he was provided the reasons for the denial and the evidence that supported it, but that doesn't turn out to be the case. We got to take another commercial break, Jeremy. When we come back, I want to dive into that a little bit more and the specifics of the law breaking that's happening, because Kendall's been in court before over the COVID-19 vaccine when he allegedly said that to all of his coronas meeting generals, there will be no religious exemptions for the COVID-19 vaccines. And sure enough, there were only some that were for people going out the door already. And they've been there. We need to hold folks like Kendall accountable. We'll be right back
It's a
with
trend
Jeremy
item.
Sorensen of US JAG. It is. We'll be right back on the Worldview Tube and X Spaces simulcast on the Rob Maness Show.
We live in uncertain times. In fact, we live at a time when our own governments all over the world are warning us that there could be big problems with our power grid. World War III seems to be right on the horizon. Let me ask you this. Do you have a satellite phone? Should communications go down with cell towers? Do you have a satellite phone to get a hold of that college student or your spouse who travels, whatever it might be, to get a hold of your senior adult parents? We have satellite phones at worldviewtalk.com, and you get the satellite phone for free when you sign up for their very reasonable payment programs for the service. Sign up for the service with a reasonable contract, get the satellite phone for free. Worldviewtalk.com. You'll also find they have, well, what I now have, which is a solar generator. Yeah, I have a gas generator, an LP propane generator, but what if that goes down? I want to back up to my backup. So I now have a solar generator as well. You'll find them at worldviewtalk.com. Check it out today, worldviewtalk.com.
We're here at Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington, where we've been talking to Air National Guard members with the 141st Air Refueling Wing. They say that some of them have been improperly denied medical benefits and pay after getting hurt or sick in service to our country. Now, when two guys from the same unit started to compare their paperwork, they found really similar language in their denials. In fact, they say it was almost basically cut and paste from denial to denial. As we talked to other Air National Guard members across the country with similar denials, they say they have the same kind of language in their paperwork too. We've tied it all to a recent reform effort that seemingly is backfiring for these National Guard members. We're taking their concerns now from Washington State here to Washington, D.C.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. And the Director of Guard and Reserve Affairs for US JAG, an advocacy group for service members that are being denied benefits like what you just heard about there, Jeremy Sorensen, who's a retired former fighter pilot, F-16s and A-10s, and an enlisted firefighter, so has a large amount, decades of experience in this issue. And Jeremy, I wanted to show that clip just to highlight for folks, this is not a localized problem. It's not just about Master Sergeant Buckley in Mississippi or the folks in Arizona. That clip was from Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington. This is a national level problem that's been created by bumping this policy decision, in my view, inappropriately up to the headquarters of the National Guard Bureau and the Pentagon, and that's part of what's causing this problem. But the reporter there highlighted one of the things I want to highlight. We saw the same thing in religious exemption denials for the COVID vaccine mandate on the military, blanket language in paperwork. And she pointed it out that two of the aviators had the eerily, strikingly the same language in their denials on their paperwork. That's definitely a trend. And isn't that illegal?
Absolutely, Colonel Maness. And here's what I'll tell you. There's two phrases that we see on almost every single not in the line of duty determination. And those two phrases are, quote, based on current authoritative medical literature, end quote, ... and based on accepted medical principles. Both of these are, I'll say, things that could be used in a determination. However, there actually has to be medical literature behind that or medical principles behind that. Those are noticeably absent in these determinations. So they take those verbs or that verbiage out of the regulation, cut and paste it on a not in the line of duty determination, and say, therefore, it's not in the line of duty. And I'll tell you, actually, this is a good time to talk about. One of the cases I was speaking of just before is an Air National Guard member who was incurred some problems overseas. He'd been deployed for a number of months, and he had some gastrointestinal problems, was evacuated through Landstuhl back to Walter Reed, back here in the U.S., and diagnosed with an aggressive stage 4 appendiceal cancer, so cancer of the appendix, fast-growing. I'm no medical professional, but from everything I read and have discussed, not a whole lot's known about this specific cancer. Well, they used those same verbs, the same verbiage in his not in the line of duty determination a year later, but here's the real kicker. They cited 2 studies about colorectal cancer, completely different cancer of a completely different part of the body, in order to try to say that this cancer had definitively existed prior to his service. We're talking about a 32-year veteran here. So there's some big questions there. And in both of the cases that were in that Scripps News piece and really all of our other cases, there's no meat behind these decisions. In some cases, we're literally seeing just a www.xyz as the reference. They're not actually citing anything out of these references. And I think really what it is, they've gotten away with this for a very long time. When I say they, the National Guard Bureau, the Air Force, because nobody's called them on it. And it's very difficult for an injured service member when they're just trying to get care, trying to get back to duty, to stand up to the system. They're basically told, the military ties their hands behind their back and says, hey, come fight me, right? That's how most of this works. And that's why we step in at US JAG to help out. So that I've talked a couple of specifics. We talked about Master Sergeant Jim Buckley. There were a number of conditions there and kind of what's happened lately. The member, I'm trying to withhold some names here that aren't in the press yet, but the one with cancer. But I'll tell you another one that I think you may take some great interest in. We've got a client who's an F-15 pilot. So he's a fighter pilot. His last flight was in August of 2019. He injured his back, his spine severely in the jet, and it was determined to be in the line of duty. He subsequently had multiple procedures, including spine surgery. And lo and behold, when the process started to get him into the disability evaluation system a couple years later, a gynecologist at the National Guard Bureau reversed his in the line of duty determination and said that his spine problems are because of a bike ride in which he turned his neck when he was riding a bicycle. It's stranger than fiction.
Wow.
And so that member's been 5 years.
You mentioned the Air Force Form 348, this Secretary McIntosh insisting that in itself is evidence. Well, my point with this question is, isn't the medical determination and the legal determination records of the injury, the treatment, et cetera, aren't those the actual evidence that has to go along with that form? And that's not being provided?
Absolutely. So here's where we get to, the big meat, the Constitution, the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America talks about due process. And there's the Administrative Procedure Act talks about how the government has to follow its own regulations. And of course, those being in this case, Title 10 regulations and the the derived Department of Defense instruction and Air Force instructions. Right. The Air Force instruction actually states that the clear and unmistakable evidence shall be provided to the member for their appeal efforts. Well, that's not convenient, so they don't do it. Mm-hmm. Because if the evidence was provided, obviously it would be very easy to appeal these matters. But in most cases, I believe, and this belief is pretty well founded, that there is no evidence. We review extensively the medical records on these things. And so when we talk about the process here at the National Guard Bureau, there's a contract nurse generally that makes the first decision there. And then everybody after that falls in line with that contract nurse's decision. So you've got a wing commander and medical professionals and attorneys, the JAGs at the base, who have all said it's in the line of duty. The contract nurse says, with those statements I said before, that it's not in the line of duty. The JAG at the National Guard Bureau simply rubber stamps that same thing, concurs that it's not in the line of duty. An administrator concurs, and then the approving official at the National Guard Bureau, who's a personnelist, concurs with that, and then it's finalized. There's an appeal effort, but in all but one case in the last 2.5 years, no appeal yet has been successful.
Wow, it's tragic. It's tragic. Well, we've got some questions in the live audience, Jeremy. I'm going to go over there. Our host is Shell. Shell, go ahead. I see the hands up.
We have Wib, sir.
Thank you, Shell. Thank you, Colonel. Thank you, Mr. Sorensen. I have a question, and it might be something that you're getting to, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping the gun. For people that are preparing to get LODs and apply for benefits, is there anything prophylactic that they can do?
So you're talking really kind of to prepare for it in advance?
Yeah, how can they protect
exactly?
So the most important thing is to report your injury, illness, or disease as soon as you know about it, and keep good written documentation of it. So when you report it, don't just go to your supervisor or medical professional at the base and talk about it verbally. Put it in writing. They are required to start a line of duty determination, kind of dependent on what status you're in, and then obviously maintain all of your own records, get copies of everything, kind of the standard mantra, I guess you will, if you will, with anything in the military. And then I would quite frankly, as soon as you're injured in the line of duty, reach out to ourselves, and we can help you through that process. We have limited resources, but we do. And then a lot of times, unfortunately, because of what's going on, we also help connect folks with an attorney team, because you need a very high level of expertise and understanding to challenge what's going on. It shouldn't be this way, but we found that the system is so emboldened to deny benefits that we try to get legal advice, legal counsel representatives on board as quickly as possible. So the big thing is documenting, letting the command and the medical professionals at the base know immediately if they stumble or try to deny getting a line of duty started. You need to demand that in writing. And in the Air Force, at least, DAFI 36-2910 is the document, that the instruction that kind of governs and tells the government how this process works, even though they don't necessarily follow it.
That's good advice. Man, I still have this question lingering about the 32-year veteran coming back from overseas through launch school and Walter Reed and has a cancer. Isn't the medical provider records enough evidence and the circumstances of where this person was at on duty to say, yeah, this is line of duty? I guess I'm confused as to how a nurse practitioner or a nurse or in the case of the gynecologist evaluating a spinal injury for a fighter pilot in the cockpit, how do these headquarters medical people overturn the provider and the legal opinion at the base level so easily without any evidence?
It's a great question, and it's the question that I've been demanding an answer to for the last couple of years. We have currently serving and retired JAGs demanding the same answers, and we have all been stonewalled. In fact, normally it's been a contract nurse. It's a contract nurse again now. On that specific one, that was an active duty 06, so colonel doctor, that cited colorectal cancer studies in order to say that the appendiceal cancer existed prior to service and was not service aggravated. There is no explanation, sir. There is absolutely no way to explain these things with logic or based on law and medicine. The only explanation is a concerted effort to deny benefits in order to save the government money.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. This phrase that I've heard in my research for the show after the break here, Jeremy, because there's no logic. It makes no sense. And you're not talking about with me and Jeremy and some of our audience. You're not talking about people that don't know about this process. We do know about it, and we're confused, and we dealt with it as commanders, as individuals, as supervisors before. So it deserves a very deep look because something is not right. As a matter of fact, it smells like deep corruption to me. And I'm wondering where the problem is in the process and the authority level. So we'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show with Jeremy Sorensen of U.S. JAG talking about this denial of medical benefits for military service members in the Air National Guard especially. And it's not good. This needs to be resolved right away. We'll be right back.
October 26th, Buckley was in a very dark place. At 11:54 p.m., he wrote the Air Force Secretary and National Guard senior leadership.
I am drowning and I'm reaching out for your help. Please do not turn a deaf ear and a blind eye to me.
When I see you read that email, I see the paper shaking.
This is coming from a place of pain in my heart. And secondly, my entire career, you don't question authority.
A National Guard spokeswoman insisted evidence was provided to Buckley to back up the injury denials, adding a review of the medical records and application of accepted medical principles led the Air Reserve Board to conclude these conditions existed prior to service.
The criticism is that cases like this are milking the system.
Right.
Are you milking the system?
No, not in any way. The last thing I ever wanted to do was get injured. I would have stayed in until I was 60.
Would you want your son to go into the Guard?
Years ago, I would have had a much different answer. The furthest thing I could think of is him joining the military.
16-year-old Matthew Buckley would have been the family's fourth generation to serve.
I'm so conflicted in saying that because my grandfather, my father, myself, and I'm very proud of the service and I love the military, but to think that he could be put through the ringer. All it takes is one injury.
CBS News has learned both the Defense Department and Air Force internal watchdogs have opened cases into Buckley's allegations, which include abuse of authority and failing to provide evidence to back up those final determinations. Anne-Marie.
This is such a heartbreaking story because you can see how dedicated he is and how betrayed he feels. And he's not the only one. Nearly 500,000 Americans serve in the National Guard, with more than 40,000 currently engaged in missions around the world. But many of them serve in the military mostly part-time. And I'm wondering if that's part of the factor. What have you been hearing from soldiers? Why do they think they're getting their benefits denied?
Well, a lot of it has to do with, and I know from my reporting the last few weeks, a very complex bureaucracy. I mean, it's not easy to navigate these systems. You have a recommendation at the local level, the local command level, and then there's a final adjudication or final decision at the national level or the Air National Guard. And what we heard from a number of service members is that if they did eventually get their injury claims approved, it took 2 or 3 years to accomplish. And for most service members, they just don't have the bandwidth to do that. And a lot of them that we spoke to just simply gave up.
Of course, especially while you're dealing with a chronic injury or an illness. Yeah, it's going to be hard to keep up that fight. Catherine, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and unfortunately, we're talking about another aspect of the war on American service members. And our guest today is the Director of Guard and Reserve Affairs at U.S. JAG, Jeremy Sorensen, who's a retired fighter pilot himself and former enlisted firefighter. Has decades of experience in this, just like I do, in this issue. And Jeremy, one of the things that stands out to me is we are in a major recruiting crisis in our all-volunteer force right now, and the Guard and Reserve are key components of the United States of America being able to deter our enemies or, God forbid, have to go fight and win a war. And this just adds to that national security issue, doesn't it?
Absolutely, Colonel. The recruiting and retention, obviously, as we all know, is kind of in the gutter right now. And obviously, there's a myriad of reasons for that, but this is probably one of the most fixable and most important aspects of that for us to really examine and really fix. We take it for granted when we join the U.S. military that when we get injured, we will be taken care of. It's simply not the case. And so we're selling our young men and women who put the uniform on a false bill of goods. And our senior leadership knows that. They know what they're doing. This is not, again, I've said it before and I stress over and over, this is not by mistake, by happenstance. This is a concerted effort to do this in order to save money. We were talking, I guess, just before the break about those incentives and all. What's very curious to me, interesting, is that the decision that everybody at the headquarters at the National Guard Bureau falls in line with in most of these is a decision made by a contractor that overturns multiple U.S. military officers' decisions and determinations. That is highly problematic. I'm not sure what the contract incentive is, if there is one, and how anybody thinks it's proper. I don't believe there's a provision in law or anything for the nurse up there to overturn physicians' decisions, to overturn wing commanders and JAGs, etc. Healthcare providers up there, these are administrative providers, really. They're not, it doesn't appear they're actually practicing medicine, and in this capacity, they're not. They're making these determinations based on costs, not based on the law and the medical facts. And we found that that's not just in this with the Guard and the Reserve. There's also a monumental problem in our active forces, especially with mental health care, with mental health diagnoses, where diagnoses are actually being changed by government providers in order to deny disability benefits upon separation. That's a whole nother thing we can get into, but it's the same, just another avenue of the same denial of benefits that we're seeing here in the Garden Reserve.
Yeah, I mean, the person that brought this issue to my attention was J.M. Phelps, the journalist, who is a friend of the show, in all transparency, but also a friend of service members. I mean, he specializes, in my opinion, on these types of stories. And he sent me a copy of the letter that he actually wrote to Representative Jim Banks, who's the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee Military Personnel Subcommittee. And he talks about Sergeant Ortiz, the Marine artilleryman who I mentioned earlier, Master Sergeant Buckley, and then Staff Sergeant Kyle Matthews, who is one of those people with the mental health diagnosis issues, and is suicidal and was still kicked out of the military. And unfortunately, I checked with Mr. Phelps before I came on the air, and he has not heard anything back from Congressman Banks' office or the subcommittee staffers at all, which is, in my opinion, very disappointing, very unusual. Hopefully somebody will see this and send it to them, because this has got to be addressed very quickly. I mean, lives are at stake. Lives are at stake. National security is at stake, and accountability. And, you know, those of us that have been in and out of uniform over the last 25 years, we're in search of accountability, aren't we, Jeremy?
Absolutely. And if, you know, I spent a couple years enlisted and then almost 2 decades as an officer in the U.S. Air Force, the Air Force Reserve, and the Air National Guard. And that, I would say, was my biggest takeaway as a leader, is that I had to be accountable for my actions. And what I've learned in the last few years doing this work is our senior leadership and the United States military bears absolutely no accountability for their actions. Dozens of individuals, organizations, and the media have brought these matters to the attention of senior leaders, to the inspectors general of the Air Force, the Department of Defense. They've been ignored. The Air Force National Guard Bureau have consistently misled, lied to service members, the media, and even more importantly, to the U.S. Congress. I have extensive communications that have been sent to the House Armed Services Committee, as well as the Senate Armed Services Committee, specifically the Subcommittee on Personnel, and Representative Banks and Representative Kim. Absolutely stonewalled, ignored. We've tried to work with these folks. These are the folks that we elect to run the business of the country, and quite frankly, they are failing miserably. And they do not care about the American service member, and it's going to take a lot for that attitude amongst many, many Americans to change. It's going to take actual action, not the platitudes and what we see in political ads, et cetera.
Yeah, unfortunately, Jeremy, we're running out of time on this show, but also unfortunately is even our congressmen on both sides of the aisle that we elect have a great hesitancy to hold senior leaders in the U.S. Armed Forces accountable. It's not only a trend, it's a corrupt outcome that has got to be turned around, or we will not have an armed forces that's filled with generational service families like mine and Sergeant Buckley's, probably yours. You know, we're the ones that are no longer recruiting our children and grandchildren and their friends to join this all-volunteer force, and that's hurting national security because we don't trust the leaders to be held accountable when they do things improperly or illegally or just unethically. And tell folks where they can find USJAG and real quick what the next steps are for some of these cases.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. USJAG.org is where we are. Some of our partners that do God's work really on all this. The Veterans Advocate, there are our legal counsel that we work with extensively, and then Walk the Talk Foundation and Mr. Ryan Swayze. Also the media, yourself, Mr. J.M. Phelps, Catherine Herridge, Melissa Blasius of Scripps News have all done, and I know I'm missing some, have done phenomenal work of bringing this to the national spotlight, so that we can get some resolution. We are going to continue to press to hold the senior leaders accountable, and it's no threat. I am here to say this will not end. This will not end with you ignoring it. It will not end because you have more power than the service member. You don't. We're the American public. We have the right to free speech, and you will be held accountable. Thank you so much, sir.
Well, thank you. Jeremy Sorensen, the Director of Guard and Reserve Affairs for U.S. JAG. Folks, if you can go check out their website, help them out. They do this work pro bono, as he said, for these service members and their families that have been really hurt by the process, and in many cases by my own service, the United States Air Force. And we will hold people accountable. Eventually, it may take us a while because you think you have the power, but we will hold you accountable. Tomorrow's Training Tuesday. Chad Caton, our friend of the show, has been working in Western North Carolina, helping the good folks up there that have just been devastated by Hurricane Elena, is back with us to give us an update. And we'll talk about the so-called fake Nazi rally that the fake media is apparently all over. So it should be an exciting show tomorrow and very informative on the Western North Carolina issue to see how things are going and what he has seen. We'll see you tomorrow on Worldview Tube and X Spaces Simulcast.